Hello and welcome to the SaaStock Spotlight Series. This is a new series that we have created to help give a platform to some industry experts in our community that you may or may not have heard from before. The idea behind the Spotlight Series is to talk through opportunities, threats, new strategies, new initiatives, new trends that we're seeing in various industries across the SaaS world, and talking through them with someone that knows them a lot better than I do. This week's guest is going to be Chris Weber. He's the COO of SaaSOptics, who are a leader in subscription management for B2B SaaS companies, helping them to automate order to cash, eliminate spreadsheets, and scale faster. They're one of the fastest growing private companies in Atlanta, and we're extremely excited to have Chris on board this week. So let's dive into it. Welcome to the Spotlight Series, Chris. It's great to have you here. For everyone, Chris is the COO at SaaSOptics. He's been there for around 3.5 years, and SaaSOptics are a leader in the subscription management space for B2B companies, helping to automate order to cash, eliminate spreadsheets, and to scale faster. So, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
No worries at all. Well, just to get a bit of background into yourself, kind of what's your path been to get to SaaSOptics and your background up to this point?
Sure. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey. I actually joined SaaSOptics coming from a company that was a passionate champion and customer of SaaSOptics back when SaaSOptics was kind of in its earlier days. And just the value that we were receiving from the product at that point in its evolution was just incredible. We kind of always, as a finance team, and my background's in finance and accounting, and there as the manager of financial operations. But we kind of always bought into the impression that we needed to live with all the pains of a traditional GL until one day we were going to invest in an ERP. But we knew that was a very expensive implementation and costly implementation. But we were really looking to solve the pain points around revenue recognition, SaaS metrics, and kind of the variances in sales negotiated contracts. So luckily we found SaaSOptics, and it was a great experience as a customer. And I think the turning point for us is we still one day, bought into that and achieved that dream of implementing an ERP, and realized that, in a lot of ways we took a step back from the functionality we were enjoying from SaaSOptics. So that was kind of my catalyst to call up the founders and say, hey, look, I know where you're at in the evolution. I just want to be a part of this journey. And it's been an incredible 3.5 years and haven't looked back.
Awesome. I've similar path for me to SaaStock, to be honest. I was a customer of SaaStock, went to a couple of conferences, and when I saw a position in customer success here, I jumped on the chance as well. So I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate endorsement. We've had my story reoccur a few times here, and you can't get any better than that when customers are pounding on your doors to join the company and join the effort. So incredible stories on both sides.
100%, and it's great to have you here. I know, as you say, your background's in economics, and you're more on the money side of things. So I think a good conversation for us to have will just be around the wider economic impacts that you're seeing just in the entire SaaS industry at the moment as a result of everything that's gone on in the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, it's certainly been a complex year and an unprecedented year as kind of everybody's latched onto that term, and it is accurate. I think one thing that's extremely positive in the SaaS space and the software space and subscription space is just the resiliency of that business model. I think in years prior and entering this year, it was very apparent that the SaaS industry was kind of the way of the future for technology, and that the perpetual model was kind of dying. From that perspective, because you're always building on the momentum that you have. Your subscription base is just continuing to increase. But I think what we're finding in economic downturns as well, that subscription model provides you a lot of runway to make adjustments to your business model, to maybe your product roadmap, to focus on your install customer base, which we might get to a little bit later in the conversation. But it's proven really resilient. Now, of course, if you're in an industry where you're serving marketing events or conferences or the entertainment industry, I think you experience that downturn a little bit more sharply. But again, we're seeing that recover as well with the advent of the virtual events, especially what you guys are doing with SaaStock. I mean, that was an incredible success. So really exciting to see that. And I think that's a positive optimism or cautious optimism is really what we're seeing in the industry. Now, there's a little bit of conservative nature where it's like maybe with the subscription model or the SaaS model, we're going to feel the impacts of the events that have occurred the first half of the year a little bit more in the second half. So I think, all businesses are kind of watching those metrics to see what happens. But overall, I think it's going to weather the economic conditions pretty well.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. I think just the way it's gone, obviously you're going to see an initial hit because of uncertainty and volatility, but the market and the world has bounced back from these sorts of things before. And you raise a really good point of just around business models. Are you sort of seeing any new strategic approaches or trends just in how companies are looking at business models and pricing at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it does bode well for the SaaS space in general, because most software SaaS businesses are looking to make the industry that they target more efficient. And I think that's going to be the continued trend. It's really unfortunate that the events have caused companies to evaluate their workforces. We've seen even, unfortunately, some really large, unicorn type SaaS companies having to make hard decisions and cutting headcount. And I think that ultimately will bode well for the SaaS space, though, because I think as companies reevaluate their growth plans and look to expand again, it's not only is it really expensive, it's painful to ramp employees. But if if VCs are pouring capital into your business, it's really tempting to gravitate to that. It's like, oh, let's just expand by adding 10 more of, you name the department and the headcount. And we've seen that growth trend over the last couple of years. I think what we'll find now is businesses are really going to start to look to grow more efficiently. And if you're in a space or have a software product that addresses that pain point, I think you're going to stand to really benefit from that. With that, though, I think we're seeing a trend of moving away from per seat pricing models. Because if you're trying to make your the markets you serve more efficient, inherently you should see a reduction in the number of seats, and potentially that also limits the broader adoption of your product if you're charging on a per seat basis. So I think we're also seeing a trend moving towards more value-based pricing and scalable models not tied to headcount.
For sure, and I think with that being said, and the move to less headcount based subscription models, what do you think the wider impacts will be there for companies that are doing that at the moment? What will that shift look like?
I think, broadly speaking, a lot of companies are looking at not just licenses or seats that are allocated, but the utilization and assignment of those seats. I think that is the beauty of the subscription-based model. As long as you're not doing monthly subscriptions tied to seats or seat utilization, you can get ahead of that. And you know what your renewals are going to look like. You know what the utilization and assignment of those seats are. So you have an opportunity to improve, reinvest in those customers and in your install base. And I think, as I alluded to in the intro, we're seeing SaaS companies do just that, reinvesting in their CSM team, investing in their installed base, their customers through a reprioritization of the product roadmap, et cetera. So really protecting their installed customer base. And I think everybody stands to benefit from that. It's not just, let's go grab a new market or a new add-on or feature. Let's be best in class at what we do.
Awesome. And one question I really want to ask, as a subscription management company, what's this whole situation looking like for yourselves? How's the inbound requests? Are they coming in more during this period, or what's the trend like?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and we received some validation from colleagues in the space and customers, and just understanding what they're seeing. And initially, I think broadly, in a lot of ways, consumption of content and white papers or case studies, there was a lot of initial interest. And what was kind of too early to tell is that interest more of just people are in an education mode and they have a little bit more time. The unfortunate nature of the remote model and working from home is people tend to, have a harder time separating themselves from, the work-life balance. So, as cautious optimism, are they just in an education mode? No, that's still a benefit. But what we found is actually a lot of people engaging in those buying cycles, both for us and our customers are seeing that as well, which is great. I think that's kind of the starting to provide evidence to that theory that companies are reevaluating their model. And I think a lot of people used to champion, we're at X headcount as a kind of a milestone of, hey, we've reached, an achievement. And I think we'll see a reprioritization and maybe looking at ARR towards divided by the number of full-time employees, right? Like as an efficiency metric, how efficient are you able to grow? So we stand to benefit from that trend, certainly.
Awesome. And what is it that your best customers are doing, would you say, at the moment? How are people that you're working with closely doing this as best as possible in your space?
Yeah, I think the other impact too is, we like to think that everybody's going to, benefit from that efficiency, and certainly that's the leading hypothesis on our end. But we're certainly seeing people more conservative in preserving cash flow. So, bodes well for our market. We sell to the finance teams. We're trying to make them as efficient and productive as possible, so that they're adding value to the company rather than, stuck in kind of the routine tasks. So the strategic importance on the finance team has increased, but cash flow is a huge spotlight's been put on cash flow. So our customers are experiencing that on demands on their invoice payment schedules, extending the payments, et cetera. And on the opposite side, they're trying to get cash in the door. So there's some competing priorities there, but we've been in a position to reprioritize our product roadmap, and we did a couple creative things by allowing customers to set credit card thresholds. So that means, you can raise the threshold amount that you would want somebody to pay an invoice through credit cards. So like internally, in the heat of kind of everything that was going on, we sent out to all of our open invoices, hey, we've raised the limit. If you want to pay this invoice by credit card, we welcome that, just to make things a little bit easier. And then also doing some creative things around payment terms. So allowing customers to pay via credit card, within the first 5 days, right? So if you have net 30 terms, you might say, oh, this $20,000 invoice will allow a credit card payment on it, and we're willing to pay those fees and those merchant processing fees if we receive payment in the first 5 days. Otherwise, ACH, wire, manual checks to a lockbox, et cetera. So some creative things like that.
Awesome. Well, first point, fantastic use of the word spotlight. I love that. Secondly, as someone in customer success, it's very good to hear when vendors are understanding what issues that their own end users are going to be facing, and how can they adapt to a situation to make it more beneficial for their customers to actually use a tool, as opposed to just letting them react and staying stuck in the same way. So I think that's a very good point you raised there. And so, Chris, one thing that's jumped to my mind is looking at, with everything that's going on, going back to the whole COVID situation, is looking at a shift in the importance of metrics that SaaS companies are benchmarking against. Is there any insight you could give on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be heightened focus on the efficiency metrics going into this year. I think in a lot of ways, companies will get a little bit of a pass this year as far as growth numbers and valuations based on growth numbers. If you're still able to prove that you're able to grow in a macroeconomic economy like it is right now, I think that bodes really well for you as a company, because it shows that even in turbulent times, you're still able to achieve some level of growth. But in a lot of ways, I think the focus and spotlight is really on those churn metrics. Understanding if you are experiencing churn this year, what was the cause of that churn? Is that churn likely to come back? So focusing, like one of the unique things we do in our subscription momentum reporting and analytics is being able to categorize customers that are net new or versus customers that have been won back. So is this short-term churn? And I think the emphasis on understanding, the plan that you kind of started 2020 on, the variance to where you end up in the year, what the direct result of that was. So certainly a spotlight on those churn metrics.
Awesome, for sure. It's a word I cover my ears when I hear the word churn as someone in customer success. It's never what you want to see. But I think it's a very valid point. And with the way that the economic period is going, do you think that you'll see a lot of increase in churn amongst a lot of companies, or do you think that this will help SaaS businesses pivot more and pay real attention to those customers?
Yeah, I don't know. I think in a lot of ways, it depends on how you categorize churn. So if you're not breaking down the reasons for the churn, certainly do so. I think customers or, the SaaS industry might see an increase in uncontrollable churn that's really due to, the macroeconomic conditions, stuff that's outside of their span of control. Sources, that are directly related to them moving to a competitor, or like you losing that customer. That's really the kind of that breakdown, segmentation, and the cohort analysis that I was kind of alluding to. But ultimately, I think the SaaS industry, again, is going to be resilient. And as long as you're focused on making the industry you serve more efficient, I think that's going to be the trend as we look out as far as, where the economy goes and recovers. I don't think, I'd be worried if you're serving an industry that's focused on, recruiting or areas like that. Maybe we'll see an uptick in that. But again, value-based pricing versus seat-based pricing is where I would focus.
Cool, for sure. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on and talking through just the whole SaaS world and the macroeconomic impacts of everything that's going on at the moment. And one final question from me that you didn't know about before was my fun question at the end. So here you go. If you were stuck on a desert island, I want two things from you. One is your desert island disc. So band, artist, soundtrack. What's the soundtrack of your desert island? And secondly is, what is your meal that you eat there?
Ooh, those are great questions. I feel like I love pizza, so I'm going to go with pizza. It's probably the one food, if I'm stuck on an island, I wouldn't get sick of. Soundtrack, that's an interesting question. I'm not a huge, music connoisseur, so probably something relaxing, right? If I'm stranded on an island, definitely want some relaxing, tropical type music, so to make the best of the situation for sure.
I love that. Most people would be panicking. You're having a party for one on the desert island.
Hey, focus on the things you can control. Just like churn, you got to focus on the controllable churn.
I love that. Well, Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. And it's been a joy. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Amazing. Cheers.